Alrighty, we're going to get started here. Thank you for joining the Fin 9.2 overview presentation. Just a couple bit of housekeeping before we get into the content. Um, First off, I want to introduce ourselves. I'm Michael Edwards. I'm a multimedia designer and developer here with the controller's office, and I'll be helping to run the webinar today, and we'll have some interesting interactive stuff you guys will see. And then also our trainer today is Lisa Villad. She's our finance learning specialist. And before I turn it over to her, we're going to go over a couple of things. So first off, with the little GoToMeeting or GoToWebinar interface here, there's two things that we want to point out. One, we have a handout we created. We also emailed this to you, but if you've missed it or you want to download another copy, it's here in the webinar as well. So you can click and download that for later reference. And then also, we're going to have some dedicated moments during the webinar. We're going to be open for questions, and you can use this question box to type your questions, and then we'll be answering as many as we can with the time we have. If you have any trouble with your audio, if the audio is cutting out, or you just it might be easier to call in, you can use this phone number and access code to dial in from a phone. And just sometimes that's easier if your Wi-Fi is not great and you just want a more consistent connection. So I'm going to leave this slide up for a few seconds just in case anyone's writing down these numbers. There's also a place in GoToWebinar where you can choose telephone, and it'll give you these numbers as well. So just a few more seconds for anyone writing this down. All right. So we're recording this webinar, so we're going to be editing that down to a nice concise presentation, and we'll be sharing that out probably within a week. We'll be emailing that out. So if you want to review any of the content we talk about today, you'll be able to do that. Or if you have some colleagues that missed the webinar and you think they should really see this stuff, you'll be able to share that with them. We're going to have some interactive polls, so hopefully this won't be like a normal boring webinar, but we'll have some interaction. So let's try one of these polls real quick just to try this out. So I'm going to launch the poll here. And the question is, what campus are you from? And I see the votes skyrocketing. I'll share the results in a second after everyone has a chance. All right, it looks like we've topped out. About 92% have voted, so I'm going to close this poll. 2 more seconds. 2, 1. Okay, I'm going to share the results, and we can see we got 41% from Boulder, 28% from Anschutz, 15% from the System, 10 from the Springs, and 6% from Denver. So thanks for voting. We're going to have some other polls throughout, but this was just to get your feet wet. All right. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Lisa.
Hi there, as Mike stated, my name's Lisa, and I'm the Finance Learning Specialist. And the question is, well, why are you here today? Well, the reason why we're all here today is on November 10th, we're transitioning to PeopleSoft Fin 9.2. If that's not why you're in this webinar, you are in the wrong webinar. So at the end of this webinar, if there are 4 things that I would want you to remember from today, it would be the roles of the General Ledger Work Center, changes and new features to favorites, workflow and worklists, and the new inquiry and search features in PeopleSoft Fin 9.2. So as this cartoon asks, what would happen if we didn't change it all? We've all been through system changes and upgrades and understand some of the challenges that will come along with it. But if we continue using an outdated system, we would be missing out on new features and technology, which we'll be talking about today. So one of the new features in Fin 9.2 that I'm actually really excited about is the General Ledger Work Center. So the Work Center is where you're going to do most, if not all of your work within the system. So when you first log into the system, the General Ledger Work Center will be on the left side of your screen, and it's going to remain there as you do your work. Think of this as one-stop shopping for processing transactions, running reports and queries, and looking up information, such as speed types and chart fields. Here's a view of what you'll see the first time you log into Fin 9.2. So here on the left side, you'll see the General Ledger Work Center. You'll notice that there's 2 tabs. there's a main tab, and a reports and queries tab. There's 4 sections of the General Ledger Work Center split between the 2 tabs. So on the main tab, you'll see a My Work section and a Links section. So the My Work section is going to contain things from your work list. We'll cover work lists in a little bit more detail later on, but your work list is a list of items awaiting action by you, such as journal entries awaiting approval. You can also add additional content to this area. So let's say that part of your monthly process is that you review any journal entries with errors. You can actually go ahead and add a link to that right here within the My Work. So yes, you did actually hear that. You can adjust this and add items to it that aren't already there when you first log in. The links section is actually my favorite section of the General Ledger Work Center. Links will connect you to other places within the system where people commonly go, such as to create, update journal entries that you'll see here on your screen. It's also going to have links to other things that you commonly do, such as a speed type lookup or a chart field lookup. If you don't see it, when the first time you log in, if you don't see the places that you commonly go to within the system, you can actually add them here to the links to the links section on the General Ledger Work Center. So we're going to take a moment and take a quick quiz. I'm going to turn this over to Mike for that.
All right, I'm going to pull up the quiz here. This is a true-false question. When I log into Fin 9.2, there will be links already listed for me in my links section. We're up to 70% voted. Give you guys 5 more seconds if you're still thinking about your answer. All right, I'm going to close the poll and share the results. So 83% of you said true and 17% said false. So Lisa will tell us whether this was true or false.
Okay, so it's actually true. So the first time you log into Fin 9.2, you will see some links already there for you, and it's going to be for the commonly used links, such as to create journal entries, and you'll also have links to look up speed types and chart fields. Also keep in mind that if you don't see links that you normally use listed there, such as a link to the report manager, you can actually add it to that section. So now let's talk about that second tab, the Reports and Queries tab. The Reports and Queries tab is going to have the 2 sections that's in its name. It's going to have the queries section and a report section. So within the queries section, you'll see a list of public queries that are commonly used. If there's a public query that you do use that you don't see listed the first time you log in here, you can go ahead and add that. And you can also add queries in here that you have created yourself. When you run a query from the General Ledger Work Center, so when you run it from here on the left-hand side, the results will display on the right-hand side here for you. And as you'll see, your Work Center will stay here on the left for you. The next section, the Reports and Processes section, will contain links to reports that are commonly used. If there's a report that you use that aren't listed, you can add that. And so if you click on a report name here, on your right is where it'll pop up where you can enter the run control ID and go ahead and run the report. So as you've been hearing me mention, for the 4 different sections of the Work Center, you can add additional content to it. So there will be some links already there for you, but you can add your own if you don't see what you need listed there. So in each section, you'll see in the upper right-hand corner of each section, you'll see this drop-down menu. And so to add the links, you would select Personalize. And then there's 2 different things that you can add to each section. On the top here, you can see that you can add a group label. So a group label is, think of that as a category. And that's what you see over here on the left. You see the CU chart fields and speed types. That's a group label. You can also add a link. So the links would appear underneath the group labels here, and that's the actual link to the location within the system that you're going. So here I'm going to add the group label reports, and underneath that I'm going to add the report tools link. So something to keep in mind, I did this the first time I actually tried to add a link to this section, is you actually want to add them at the same time. So if you add a new group label or category, but you don't put a link underneath it, it's not going to show up. So you won't see empty categories on your work center. So you want to make sure you do both at the same time. Once you do that, you can just go ahead and click refresh on your screen and you'll see your new label and link listed there. So many of you may be using favorites in the system right now, which are bookmarks to the places you use frequently in the system. So you may be asking yourself, well, what is the difference here between favorites and then adding links to the General Ledger Work Center? Something to keep in mind is the links section of the General Ledger Work Center does provide links, and you can add links to other places within the system. But one of the features that you get with the General Ledger Work Center that you don't get with favorites is in the General Ledger Work Center, you can actually add links to places outside of the system. So let's say you want to link to policies and procedures, or maybe to resources and help. You can go ahead and add that to the General Ledger Work Center. Something else to keep in mind is that if you do use favorites in 8.4, those favorites will not be migrated over to 9.2. But this really may not be that big of a deal to you, because keep in mind, the first time you log in that General Ledger Work Center, there's already going to be some links there for you, and then you can go ahead and add your own. So I'm going to turn this over to Mike now, and we're going to take a quick poll.
All right, let me pull up the poll real quick. And the question is, what links would be helpful to see in my links? And you can actually check more than one on this poll. I see we've got about 75% have answered. I'll give you guys about 5 more seconds. All righty, I'm going to share the results. And it looks like most of you thought that just links to places you go often and learning resources were the top answers, with 84 and 73%. And about half of you said maybe policies would be helpful. All right, back to you, Lisa.
Okay, so one of the new features that you can see in favorites in 9.2 is if you click on that favorites link in the upper left-hand corner here, you will see your favorites once you have added them in 9.2. Keep in mind that you may just want to add them as links to your General Ledger Work Center down here. But you'll also see under favorites, you will see the 5 recently used places that you've gone within the system. So now we're going to take some time to answer some questions. We will have additional time at the end, but we'll take a couple minutes here to answer any questions that you have so far.
And just in case your GoToWebinar interface has shrunk into the side, there's a little orange arrow icon you can use to pop it back open if you want to see this little question box. Okay,
great. So I'm really glad someone asked this question. And the question was, will I have to, if I have queries in 8.4, will I have to recreate them in 9.2? And the answer is no. You do not have to recreate the queries that you had in 8.4 when you migrate to 9.2. Those will still be available to you. It's your favorites that won't. Okay, so another question is, does the recently used actually link me somewhere, or does it just display? So that this person's referring to the favorites drop-down menu. And actually, when you select the favorites drop-down menu and you see the recently used, you can click right on that link and it'll take you to where you need to go within the system. Another great question, is this system replacing the Cognos reporting system? The answer is no, we will still have the Cognos reporting system. Oh, another great question. Will we be receiving step-by-step guides, and will they be available in the system? And the answer to that is yes. When you log into Fin 9.2, within that links section, there should be a link there to resources and help, which will take you to your step-by-step guides, your how-to videos, and all of that. Since you have taken this webinar, you will have access to those before we actually go live on November 10th. Included in the email that you will be getting after this webinar, there will be a link to the step-by-step guides. Another question is, so I can, within the links section of the General Ledger Work Center, I can link to websites out of the system such as Google. And the answer to that is yes. Within the links section of the General Ledger Work Center, you can add links to places outside of the system, which is what makes the Work Center unique in comparison to using favorites.
There was also another question here asked, will reports from 9.2 and MFin be acceptable backup support for journal entries? Do you know the answer to that one?
Okay, I would say yes and no. To answer supporting documentation for journal entries, you want to make sure that whatever supporting documentation you attach to a journal entry, that it does explain it. The way that I like to phrase it is you don't want to have to be standing next to your approver having to describe or explain the supporting documentation to it. So if the report is sufficient, then yes, you can use that as supporting documentation for the journal entry. Something unique about 9.2 that we'll be talking about in a little bit more detail later on is that you can actually attach that report electronically to a journal entry within the system.
And one other question here is Fin 9.2 replacing Cognos reporting? Did you already answer that one?
Yes,
Okay.
but just to remind everyone, no, Fin 9.2 is definitely not replacing the Cognos reporting system. Okay, so we'll wrap up questions at this point in time. Just keep in mind you will have an opportunity later on to ask additional questions. So looking at this cartoon, I'd like you to think about if you've ever been in a situation where you've submitted a lot of transactions for approval, but they're getting hung up somewhere. Maybe it's because you didn't send your approver an email or an instant message letting them know that it was out there for them to approve. Or maybe your approver had questions on it, but they didn't tell you about it, so the transaction's just sitting out there in the system. In Fin 9.2, transactions needing approval will be routed through the system using an automated process. This is called workflow. So when you submit a transaction for approval, a system-generated email will be sent to your approver. So let me let that sink in for a minute. You will no longer have to send a separate email, instant message, or text to your approver to let them know something's waiting for them. The system's going to generate an email to your approver, and the transaction then will appear on your approver's work list. So then you may be asking, well, what is a work list? So we had talked about it a little bit earlier. A work list is a prioritized list of work items awaiting action by you, such as for review or approval. So let's take a look at this in the system. So here your work list can be accessed from your home page. In the upper right-hand corner, you'll see a link that says Work List. Keep in mind that all items on your work list will also appear over here in the My Work section. So you may be asking yourself, what's the difference then between my work list and the My Work section in the Work Center? The work list only contains items awaiting action by you. Your My Work section will contain everything on your work list, but it can also have additional things that you do on a weekly or monthly basis, such as reviewing journal entries with errors. So that's the difference between the two. So let's go ahead and take a look at what a work list will look like. So here you'll see your work list items, and your from and date from columns here, it tells you who sent you something and when they sent it to you. The work item column indicates what you need to do to it. So here you'll see on all of these, it was routed to you for approval. The work by activity indicates how it got to you. So here it's all through the workflow. The priority column, here you can do a few things with this. You can actually go into each of these and indicate whether it's a high priority, medium priority, or low priority. And then once you've done that, you can click on this priority link here and it'll sort it from high priority to low priority for you. Then here you're actually going to have a link to the transaction itself within the system. So I can go ahead and click on this here and it's going to take me to another page that shows me a little bit more detail about the transaction. Here you'll see that we're looking at a journal for approval. And as I had mentioned earlier, I had stated that you can actually attach documentation in the system to a transaction. So here you can see the attachments link. If there are attachments on a transaction, the number of attachments will appear in parentheses next to the link attachments. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. So here I'm going to click on attachments. And then a screen's going to appear, and for every attachment, there will be a file name listed to it. So then I can click on the file name to actually view the attachment. And so here I'll see my attachment. Something to keep in mind is if you don't see your attachment, you may want to check your pop-up blockers. That did happen to me the first few times I went in here. And, where is it? I'm not seeing it. And it's because I hadn't turned off my pop-up blockers in my browser. It also, depending on the browser, the attachment's either going to show up as a separate tab or window, or it may appear as a download, just depending on which browser you're in. With attachments, you can actually add and delete attachments up until the transaction is posted. Once the transaction is posted, you can't delete attachments from it, but you can continue to add them. Here you'll see that you can actually have a link to go directly to the transaction. But something to point out is you can actually see the transaction detail on this page. So for example, in this, we're looking at a journal. On the bottom of the page, we have this link for journal lines. So I can click on that. And when I do that, I'm going to see all of the detail for the journal that I'm approving without actually having to go to the actual journal entry page itself. Here you can also see on the bottom that I have several options available to me. I can approve the transaction, or I can deny the transaction. If I deny the transaction, I can enter comments as to why I'm not approving it. I can click deny, and when I do that, the system's going to generate an email back to the person who submitted it to me. You'll also see this hold option. So what hold is that typically for each transaction, there's going to be more than one person who is listed as the approver on that. So let's say that Mike and I are both approvers on this journal, and I have a question on it. If I don't place it on hold, Mike could then actually come in and approve the transaction that I have a question on. So what I would want to do is I would want to click hold, ask my question and get it answered, and then I can come in, remove the hold, and approve it. I can also add additional approvers to this. So here you can see this green plus sign. So as an approver, if I wanted someone else to also approve this transaction, or even just add someone to review the transaction, I can click the plus sign and select the additional person that I want to approve it. Workflow is sequential though, so let's say that I add Mike as an additional approver to this transaction. I would first have to approve it myself before it was routed to him. And if you have any questions right now, workflow is being determined by each campus specifically, and that's how it's being set up. The general rule of thumb is that unless your department is doing a change to their business process, whoever approved your transactions before should still be the person that approves your transactions in 9.2. So now at this point in time, you've heard me mention a lot of things that have the word work in it. We've talked about work centers, we've talked about workflow, and we've talked about work lists. So we're going to take a quick quiz to see what the difference between the three is. For that, I'll turn it over to Mike.
All right, and this quiz will be 3 separate questions, and I'll show the results after each question, and then we'll talk about what the right answers were. So our first question is, what is the definition of a work center? Which one of these definitions best fits? I see about half of you have voted. All right, I'll give you about 5 more seconds, and we'll look at what you guys answered. All right. So it looks like 70% of you got this one right, a place where you do your work, and the rest were scattered across the other possible answers. So let's move on to our next poll or quiz question. And that's what's the definition of workflow? About 75% have voted. I'll give you guys 5 more seconds. All right, let's take a look at what you guys answered here. So 88% of you got this right. Workflow is a process of how transactions are routed through the system. And a couple of you chose a list of items awaiting your action. Let's move on to the final quiz question here. and that's the definition of Worklist. And so far you guys are overwhelmingly getting this one right. Give you guys about 5 more seconds. All right, let's take a look at the answers here. So 95% of you answered a list of items awaiting your action, which is correct. And then a few of you answered a list of recently used pages within the system. That's actually part of the favorites menu. So let's review all these answers on a slide so we can kind of see where we landed here.
Okay, so a work center is the place where you go to do your work. And remember, that is on the left-hand side of your screen when you first log into Fin 9.2, and you can add different links to that. The workflow is the actual process of how transactions are routed through the system. And then the work list is a list of items awaiting your action. So your work list, you'll have a link to it in the upper right-hand corner of your screen, or you can also access it from the My Work section of the General Ledger Work Center. So if a transaction's not on your work list, but you still want to look it up and view the attachment, you can still do that within the system. So if you want to see an attachment on a journal that is not in your work list, you would go through the way that you would typically look up a journal. And then on the header page, you would see this attachments here. And then you can go ahead and click on that, and the attachment will look the same as it did when we looked at it from our work list. So in 9.2, there's going to be some new ways to look things up. So one of the ways to look something up is called menu search. And just like you saw in the Google You Auto Complete Me, menu search works similar to a Google search. So as you begin typing something in the search menu here, so as I begin typing journal, it's going to return everything that matches what I'm typing. So as you continue to type, your list is going to get smaller and smaller. And then you can just go ahead and click on something right here from the list. Another new feature is keyword search. So here we'll take a look at the journal entry keyword search. If you'll notice on the journal entries here, you'll see that there's actually an additional tab. Right now in 8.4, you only have this find an existing value and add a new value. And if you recall in 8.4 on the finding existing value, that's where you're looking up a journal entry by, say, ID or the person who created it. But here, let's take a look at keyword search. Here I can enter my keywords in the keyword search box. This is a very broad search, meaning that if you type 2 words in here, it's going to return everything that either has, say, the invoice in it or 253A in it. So it's a very broad search. I can enter this here and then go ahead and click search on my screen. Once my search results come back here on the right-hand side, if you'll notice, you can actually filter it by additional information on the left, so I can narrow it down to say, okay, I only want to see everything from 2015, and I actually only want to see everything that's a valid journal. So you can go ahead and narrow your search that way. The keyword search is also available on vouchers. So let's say you want to look up an invoice for an airline ticket for an employee. You can do that. You can go to the Vouchers tab, and here you'll see again you have that Find an Existing Value and Add a New Value tab, but a new tab is this Keyword Search tab. So I'll click on that, and I'm going to enter my keywords for, let's say I'm looking for someone named Williams who went to Atlanta. So I'll enter that, and then I'll click Search. Keep in mind that broad search is going to give me everything that has either Williams or Atlanta in it. And so my results will appear here on the right-hand side. And then on the left, I can actually filter my results to take a look to narrow my search results. And now I'm going to turn it over to Mike for another quick poll.
So we've been talking about these different ways you can search, and we wanted to do a poll on which method you might prefer to use. Find an existing value or keyword search. So 75% have voted. Give you guys a few more seconds. All right, let's take a look at how you guys answered. So 58% of you said it depends on the situation. About 34% said keyword search, and 8% said find an existing value. So Lisa, you want to tell us about how you think about when you would use either of these search methods?
Yep. I'm giggling a little bit because I'm nodding at Mike. You all can't see me nodding out there, but yes, it does depend on the situation for me. Um, if I knew something very specific about the journal, so if I knew the ID, I would still use the find an existing value because that's a very, very specific search. If I only knew pieces of the journal, such as a word that's going to be in the description, then I would use the keyword search. So for me, it does depend on the situation. So another one of the new features that I really like in the new system is how the speed type inquiry is going to work in Fin 9.2. Here you can see a screenshot of what it looks like in 8.4. So right now, if you want to look up a speed type, you have to go to the menu and then go to General Ledger and then go to Chart Fields and then go to Speed Types. Here you'll notice when you first log in, that General Ledger Work Center is going to be there for you. And in the links section, you'll see a link here to CU Speed Types. So here I can click on it and then I can enter my speed type on the right here and click search. And then I will see all the speed type information that I would typically see in the system. So that just means it's a lot fewer clicks rather than having to navigate through the menu. You can just click right in your work center and click on speed types and look that up. It's also going to work very similarly for a chart field inquiry. So if let's say you want to look up an org code right now in 8.4, you would have to go to the menu, go to General Ledger, Chart Fields, and then look up your different chart field values here. In Fin 9.2, when you log in, you'll see in your Work Center, you'll automatically have a link to this chart fields value, this chart fields values link. So I can click on that. And then on the right-hand side, I can select which chart field it is I'm looking up. So then I can click on the organization and enter my information and click search. So it's just a very easy way to navigate to do this within Fin 9.2. Okay, so as we're wrapping up the webinar here, I just want you to keep in mind the 4 things that I want you to remember from today, and that is the General Ledger Work Center, the difference between favorites and links within the General Ledger Work Center, workflow and work lists, and the new inquiry methods that are going to be available to you in 9.2. So now we're going to go ahead and open it up for additional questions.
Just a reminder, you can use the little questions box to type in your questions.
Okay, so a question I had is, the attachment that I had was a GIF file. Are we able to add PDF files to attachments? Yes, you can do PDF, GIF files, PNG, Word docs. You can add all different types of files as attachments. Another question is, will the keyword search only search from information put into the journal description field? And the answer to that is no. It's actually looking at information in the entire journal. Another question is, can I get a copy of the slides from this webinar? Yes, those will be available to you. Also keep in mind that there will be a recording of this webinar that will be available to you. Can I provide examples of things that would appear in workflow? I'm going to answer this question in 2 parts. Keep in mind that workflow just refers to the process of how things are routed through the system. Worklist is where those things will actually show up. And then also keep in mind that your work list items appear in both your work list and the My Work section of the General Ledger Work Center. Examples would be any transaction that requires approval. So journal entries is the first thing that would come to mind that would be gone through the system for approval. Okay, another question is, does each campus finance office still approve JEs? That is going to be a question for your campus controller's office. Another question is, how does workflow know the appropriate approver for a journal entry? This is being determined right now and being loaded into the system. Another question is, do we still email backup to the finance office for the submission of a journal entry or just attach the backup to the journal entry? I want you to confirm that question, my answer with your campus controller's office, but I would state that once it's attached to the journal entry, you do not need to send it separately. So another question is, so do I need to go to Worklist at all then, since it's all going to show up in my work? That would be a personal preference, whether you work from your work list or the My Work section of your general ledger. They're both on your home page, so it really is a personal preference of how you want to do that. Question is, did you say there are step-by-steps available now? The answer to that is yes. That will be included in the email that we send after this. You will be getting a link to our website, which will have step-by-step guides and how-to videos.
There's also a question, are you going to do more videos? I like them better than step-by-steps.
Ooh, yes, definitely more videos. There's two types of videos that are available. So the first are the higher level videos that we've been sending out that give you an overview of what's coming for the system. And then there's actually going to be how-to videos that are more detailed than an overview that actually goes through how you actually do what it is we're talking about in the features video. Another question is, when will the other videos be ready? So when you look at your resources and help options that are available to you right now or will be available to you, it'll be the how-to videos that we are including in what's new in the system. Those are available to you now. On November 10th on Go Live, that's when all of the other how-to videos will be. So for things that aren't changing in the system, we will just be updating them to reflect what it looks like in the new system. But the how-to videos on what we covered today will be available in that email that we send out to you after the webinar. Would we please post a list of the videos we're going to be making on our website? I will defer that to our communications team, and the answer to that is yes. Okay, so it looks like we're wrapping up on our questions here. Just a reminder that a recording of this webinar will be provided. We also are going to be doing these sessions on campus over the course of the next several weeks, and registration is still available to that, so you can go to our website and register for a face-to-face overview if you would like that. If you want to learn more, here is our website. This will also be available to you in the email that we'll be sending out within the next week or so. Okay, well, I'd just like to say thank you all so much for your time, and we will see you in Fin 9.2.